Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Today's first story is a perfect example of how stubborn pride meets cold, hard reality. Our OP's a nurse just trying to keep a patient safe, but when a broken heart monitor sets off a chain of chaos, a certain monitor tech decides she knows better. If you've ever dealt with someone refusing to admit they're wrong, this one's for you. Let's get into it. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Monitor tech refused to do her job, so I made her prove herself wrong. This was 15 or so years ago. I got my first job in nursing at a big hospital on a unit that often used heart monitors. We had monitor screens on the unit, but because we can't always sit there and watch them, was a department in the hospital that specialized in watching them. If a patient's heart did something wonky, they'd call us, but they also called us to notify if the monitor wasn't working. I'm sure they had other duties, but I've never worked down there. So we had this patient who was admitted, and my nurse's aides were responsible for getting this patient set up on the monitor. There was only one monitor, and it wasn't working. Well, there's a checklist of things you're supposed to do if it's not working. Change batteries, change leads, shake the batteries, shave them, etc. My aide worked on this for 2 hours, and it still wasn't working. The monitor techs they called were completely unhelpful. They finally told me they had to do other work and handed me the monitor. I went through the checklist and nothing worked. I spent at least another hour that I couldn't really afford to spend trying to get it to work, so I called the monitor techs and requested a new monitor. They have certain ones that are tied to a specific unit, like the broken one, but they also have floater monitors if some unit needs extra. They could not have been less helpful. They refused to send me a new one and instead insisted there was nothing wrong with the monitor and that somehow changing the battery for the 9th time would do the trick. I lost it. My license is at stake here. I know this monitor isn't going to work no matter what I do, but I can't just leave this guy without one. If he has a heart attack and we missed it because he wasn't being monitored, I could lose my job, my license, get sued, etc. So I hung up, went to another unit, asked them for a monitor, and put him on it. It wouldn't show up on our unit screens, but it would at least be monitored by someone. We don't cross-pollinate units often, but if the place is packed and floaters are out, they do it. I called and said, he's on 8's monitor 89. Switch him over. The woman who picked up told everyone what I said, and they all groaned. I hear someone in the background say, you tell her there's nothing wrong with that monitor. They refused to turn the monitor on. So I paged the house manager, and she came down and rolled her eyes and told me that while they do teach floor staff how to troubleshoot, batteries, shaving, etc., it's actually the monitor tech's job to fix the monitors that are being buggy. I didn't know that was a thing, but she pulled some dusty book out of the shelf behind me that outlined duties. So I called back and notified them that the manual said it was their job to fix this monitor. Again, the woman who answered repeated what I had said to everyone in the room. I don't remember the exact words that were spoken, but basically the woman in the background was going to come prove me wrong. She came up and stood behind the nurse's station trying to make the monitor do anything. I was charting at the desk for most of that, and my coworkers and I spent the entire time glancing back and quietly laughing at her, getting more and more frustrated. I have to give it to her. She spent a good hour and a half before finally accepting that it just wasn't going to effing work. I never got an apology or anything, but watching her walk off in a huff was good enough. And a part of me hopes this put her behind on her own work tasks like I was. I think I would have told her that if at the end of her attempts it didn't register her heartbeat, I was going to defibrillate her since she was obviously in cardiac distress. And our second story. How my lazy students taught the assistant superintendent a lesson. I'm a technology education teacher who always went above and beyond for my school, students, and administrators. I spent countless hours designing and building things for the school, i.e. signs, murals, wall art, games, etc. I really didn't mind because I enjoy the design challenges that go along with these builds. That was until I received a pink slip. For those of you who are not aware, a pink slip basically means that I may be losing my job the following school year. This really pissed me off because I'd received great observations, became a role model for my students, and put in dozens of unpaid hours to create these side projects for the school. I had a meeting with my assistant superintendent who basically told me that she appreciated all of my hard work, but didn't see much value in my program, and with budget cuts coming down the pike, I would most likely be losing my job. Now, it needs to be mentioned that tech ed is not like the traditional shop classes of the 70s where students would build birdhouses and ashtrays. My curriculum focused primarily on STEM with heavily involved hands-on applications. I related otherwise dry material to awesome projects that all students enjoyed. Kids actually liked their schoolwork, and she knew it. It's also worth noting that both the valedictorian and salutatorian were going to Ivy League colleges to pursue STEM degrees. Needless to say, I was beyond livid. The week following the meeting, my principal asked me if I was interested in building some new games for the cafeteria that students could play when they finished eating. Easy table games like mini knock hockey, checkerboards, etc. to alleviate students from getting out of control. I explained that I could not complete the project, and that was that. Until the assistant superintendent caught me in the hallway and told me, just have the students build it. So that's exactly what I did. I tasked my laziest and most unqualified students for a special project, the result of which was glorious. Checkerboards that didn't have squares, knock hockey boards with splinters and uneven goals, laser-engraved puzzles that didn't fit together. I thanked the students and asked the assistant superintendent to come on down to my lab because the new projects were done and they were excited to show them off. In she walks, and upon seeing the projects, looks at me dead in the eye. She now has a decision to make. 1, ask me what the hell happened, or 2, tell the students to their faces what a great job they did. She opted for choice 2, going on and on about how great everything looks and how proud she was of the students, while I had the biggest smile on my face, knowing how crappy they turned out. I thanked her for suggesting to have the students build it, as she left with essentially a pile of scrap wood. The projects never made it to the cafeteria. I resigned from that school and took a job that paid $12,000 more at a place where I was valued. They ended up keeping the position and begged me to stay on board. I realized resigning was my best option because I could get an early jump on all of the new openings as opposed to being let go at the end of the summer, which would leave me with the worst schools that could not find a teacher. Gotta love it when they more or less let go of the teacher that runs a particular program, decide to keep that program, then have the nerve to basically tell the same teacher, we changed our minds, you can totally stay on. Really? After you just told me my program is essentially worthless and I'm expendable? Nah, screw that. I would have taken no small amount of pleasure in telling them that I found a better job. And our last story. Neighbors tried to steal my yard, got forced to demolish their house. A couple years ago, I had an encounter with a new neighbor that left me baffled at their audacity. I live on a nice-sized lot in a fairly peaceful suburban area, and the property next door had been empty for years until this couple purchased it with plans to build their dream home. It didn't take long after they arrived before the trouble started. One day, I noticed that the visual markers that indicated our property boundaries had been suspiciously moved. At first, I assumed it was accidental or maybe just a simple mistake by their builders. I politely approached the new neighbor, let's call him Brad, and asked him about these shifted markers. Oh, that's where my contractor estimated the property line is, Brad replied nonchalantly without even glancing up from his phone. Estimated, I asked, trying not to sound confrontational. Brad, that's not really how property lines work. There's an official survey marker buried in the ground. Did your contractor check for that? Brad just shrugged. Look, I trust my guy, all right? I think you're making a bigger deal of this than it needs to be. I was stunned, but before I could respond, Brad's wife, Karen, emerged from their car. Clearly irritated, she snapped, "Mind your own business. We're building our house exactly where we planned, and that's that. We don't need your input." With that, they walked away, leaving me speechless on my own driveway. Shortly after that frustrating encounter, I had to leave town for a work project and was away for a couple of weeks. When I returned home, I discovered to my disbelief that their construction had progressed rapidly. They'd poured a foundation and started erecting the frame of their new house. Something didn't seem right. It looked way too close, shockingly close to my property. Feeling my anger rise, I decided to double-check our official survey documentation, something I should have done from the start. Sure enough, after my wife and I dug through our files, we found our official survey paperwork complete with clearly marked measurements. It turned out Brad and Karen hadn't just moved the marker by a little, they'd moved it over by 30 feet onto my property. I grabbed the metal detector and marched out to locate the buried iron pins marking the actual boundary lines. Within minutes, I found the original markers exactly where the survey said they'd be. My blood was boiling as I set clear, bright orange stakes along the correct boundary line. The next morning, Brad and Karen stormed onto my property, furious. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen yelled, her face bright red. "I'm setting things straight," I calmly responded, showing her the official survey in my hand. "You're building your house over 30 feet into my property." Brad scoffed. "Come on, you really going to be petty about a few feet?" I held my ground. "A few feet? It's 30 feet, Brad. You didn't even bother getting a survey. You just decided to take a chunk of my land because you felt entitled to it." Their contractor, who overheard the heated exchange, looked stunned and walked over. "Wait a minute, Brad, you told me this was already approved. You said the property line was verified." Brad looked uncomfortable. "Well, I mean, it was basically verified." "No, it wasn't," I said firmly, "and now you're going to have to deal with this." After a brief investigation by city inspectors and an official resurvey, at Brad and Karen's expense, it became crystal clear that their foundation was built well onto my property. The city immediately halted construction, and Brad and Karen were forced to demolish the improperly placed foundation and start all over again, this time on their own land. But somehow, in their eyes, I became the villain. Karen went around the neighborhood bad-mouthing me, complaining loudly to anyone who'd listen about how unreasonable I was, how I ruined their plans, and how they now faced thousands of dollars in additional costs. I guess in their twisted reality, I was supposed to just quietly let them steal part of my property. They never apologized or acknowledged their wrongdoing. They simply painted themselves as victims. It didn't matter, though. I knew I'd done nothing wrong. It was their own arrogance and dishonesty that got them into that mess. And if standing up for my own property makes me the bad guy, well, I'll gladly wear that badge. They really thought they could literally steal land, move property markers, and then build a house wherever they felt like it. Can you imagine the audacity? Karen and Brad here seriously thought rules didn't apply to them. So much so, they ended up building their dream home 30 feet onto someone else's property. And instead of owning up, they made the original homeowner out to be the villain for daring to defend what was rightfully theirs. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.